morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure which part of the world everyone is in, but welcome and thank you for attending this webinar. We take a lot of effort to put the information together for you folks, and we hope you'll walk away with some useful information that you can immediately apply within your management systems. Nowadays, ironically, sometimes I have more note takers joining the meeting than actual people itself, right? So it's nice to see more people than this AI note takers in the meeting for a difference. I'm not sure if anyone else has experienced that. My name is Julius DeSilva. I'm the CEO here at QMII. And, at QMI, we're on a mission to empower systems, and help those who are passionate about systems, who have been charged with that responsibility of systems to really help them improve their own systems wherever they may be, right? And when I talk about systems, I mean your management system. And the premise for a lot of these webinars is that as we work with clients and work in the capacity of consulting or auditing, or as we've got students in a class in a training session, they sort of talk about their pain points, or we'll observe what are common things. Laura, thank you. Common things that sort of they struggle with. And that's the basis for a lot of the webinars that we put together. I'm sure there are tons of providers out there that are sending information on, ISO changes and upcoming changes. So you can always get these from a plethora of places. And therefore, as we go forward and as you walk out of this session, we hope that you will come back to us and say, have you considered doing a webinar on this? I'd really love to get your input on it, right? And we can create something based on that. But just so you know, the session is being recorded, right? Is being recorded, and I believe at the end of the session you get a recording. In case you don't, it takes us a couple of days, but we'll eventually have the webinar up on like our YouTube channel, and then a link will be sent out. Someone will follow up with an email with a link to that you can easily access. So we're here today to talk about, breaking the cycle, because it's like I have a diagram in here of Sisyphus, like pushing that rock up to the hill, and as they reach the top of the hill, the rock falls all the way back down, and you got to start all over again. And oftentimes, for a multitude of reasons, we, as an organization and across, right, the globe, you struggle with sort of implementing effective corrective action. So the intent of this session here is to sort of just present 10 different perspectives or questions through which the lens of which you can look at a corrective action that you may be tasked with implementing. This is not a problem-solving course, right? So we're not going to do in-depth into any particular methodology or anything of that sort. So as a note, it's not a problem-solving course. I'm not here to teach you some, new root cause analysis methodologies. If you want to do that, we have Lisa on the chat managing the chat for me here. She's our global solutions manager, and I know we have a problem-solving training. You're welcome to sign up for one of those, either for yourself or for a team. But that is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about these sort of sessions. Now, this webinar is provided to you just for informational purposes. It's not an indictment, especially those of you maybe in government agencies, of an endorsement of or commitment to purchase from QMII, right? I think we're pretty much all familiar with Teams or some kind of video conferencing platform, whether it be Zoom or anything else you use. And they kind of have the same functions, right? But if you have questions, you can keep dropping them in the chat. If we have time during the webinar, I have time slotted at the end, we'll try and answer some of those questions. If not, we definitely get back to you post the session, right? We definitely get back to you post the session. So like I said, common questions are, will I get a copy of the slides? Do I get a recording? And the answer is yes, right? So, a few controls of how to adjust the screen, but like I said, you're all really good at this stuff, I'm assuming. So what are we here to cover today? We're going to talk just quick, brief nutshell about QMII, sort of why we are here, what's the purpose of this presentation. And really, I think the reason all of you have signed up and you're here is you want to walk away with how can we improve our corrective actions, right? How can we improve our corrective actions? Because every time you have a non-conformity, it's like fighting fires, right? Just going from one fire to the next. And the intent of an effective corrective action is to give you more time in the firehouse, right? If you could stop fighting those fires constantly and just imagine yourself sitting in the firehouse because you took good corrective action. Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? And yeah, we have some time at the end slotted out for questions and answers as well. Okay, question and answers. So QMI is in its 40th year this year, 40th year of providing, we say best in industry, process improvement, consulting, auditing, and training, right? So yeah, we do a whole bunch of ISO standards, but we also do a lot more than that. People call us in just to do like can you come in and look at our workflows and help us just improve our workflows or help us document our system. We're not really interested in ISO. We just want you to help us improve our system, right? We want you to help us set good objectives. Or, it could be very like piecemeal sometimes when we look at it from a process improvement lens. Of course, with a name like Quality Management International Incorporated, it's often we get siloed into this one swim lane of quality, but I like to think that we do a lot more than that, right? We are headquartered in Ashburn, Virginia, but we serve clients across the globe, right? And we have like clients in over 22 countries globally that we have helped in the past, from the Middle East to Africa to Australia to everywhere. We are ISO 9001 2015 certified. We also have like a voluntary sort of conforming ISO 14001 system we put in place. For government, anyone in the government contracting world here, we have a GSA or government agencies. We have a GSA mass contract or PSS, I guess they call it now, and we are DB certified as well, right? Which is a small business certification. Here's just a small sample, right, of organizations we have worked with. I mean, we've served over 1,000+ companies to the point where we've lost track of how many we have worked with, right? There's so many. But we work with everyone from really big, like Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, to even the small, kind of mom and pop shops, like 3, 4, 5, 10 people organizations as well, right? So we have multiple federal and state agencies we have worked with, and we have a broad expanse of people that we have worked with. We do have a couple of polls as we go through this webinar, and I'd appreciate your interaction with them. There are going to be 2 polls at the start here and 2 that follow later. Okay. I'm going to launch the first one here. Just gives me a little insight on who I have in the room and kind of, help tailor that webinar appropriately for the session here. I'll leave each of them open for just about 45 seconds or so. That way, it gives you enough time to answer it, and I'll close it out within about 45 seconds. Okay. All right, you may be able to see the responses, at least it shows up in the chat. I do know. You can see majority of the folks in the room here are primarily, very primarily internal auditors, QHSE managers, right? And often what happens is we are tasked as internal auditors, we're tasked as HSE managers to sort of implement the corrective actions, close them out, right? And what are your common pain points is either people give you really bad corrective actions, and as a result what happens is over time you start doing the corrective actions for them, and you start sort of, if you may, spoon feeding them, but you tell them, right, okay, this is what the corrective action should be, do it, right? While it's easy enough in the moment to do it because you've got multiple things on your plate you're dealing with, I always encourage QHSE managers, internal auditors, not to do that, right? Not to give them the answer, because they're less invested in the solution, then they've got less skin in the game, right, with the solution that may be proposed. So always let them do it. However, you still have to close it out on your books, right? And we'll talk about these things as we go through on sometimes why do we rush through with closing out non-conformities. Excellent. So I'm going to close the poll out. I've got a bunch of responses in here. I appreciate those who quickly did that. Let me get to the next slide and the next poll as well then. Okay. Fantastic. So this is the next poll is basically, what do you see as the biggest barrier to making corrective actions truly effective? And you can select multiple options over here. Don't select all five. No, I'm kidding. You could if you want to. But yeah, you can select multiple options over here. And I think what will be interesting for people to see is that, while you may be different industries, different companies, different countries, you'll see how different people in the room here are kind of, challenged with the same sort of problems, right? If you may. And you'll see it's almost like a close to I would say, even split between the top four options. We have almost between all five, right? We've got like 15, 23, 19, 17, 25%. So almost 20% each. Uh, and these are common problems. The reason I put in the poll is because these are common problems that folks face, right, in their management systems in reality. Excellent. So I'm going to leave it open for about another 15 seconds and then close it out. Lisa, I see you engaged in the chat, and I appreciate you being here and doing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. So I'm going to close out this poll. Thank you to those who did respond. So, oops. Let's go back up here. Right. On why are we here, right? So the first thing is to understand how to push past the root cause, right? Oftentimes, because we're strained by time considerations, as you've answered rightly, right? Competing priorities, you want to quickly get some cause, close it out, because nobody likes a non-conformity on the books, right? It's like a hot potato that no one wants to hold on for too long because like my hands are burning. I need to get this out the door. Because when I report to the leadership, I want to show them sometimes a clean chit, right? Clean bill of health, right? No non-conformities, we're all good. But closing out a non-conformity too fast sometimes may give a false sense of security, right? It gives a false sense of security that things are working well, whereas they may not really be working well. We're also going to look at sort of how do we gain insight on when corrective action is effective, right? And can we really close it out? Is the corrective action truly effective or not? And to a lot of you have already gone through some kind of probably problem solving training, either covered during some auditing class you took or a separate course, or you did your own education. But we want to build on that skill set by enabling you with few extra arrows in your quiver, if you may, on sort of, I say, better questions that you can ask, right? Better questions that you can ask. And as you've seen from the poll, right, and as maybe the reason for this webinar is the observations from the audits that are done by QMII, right? The observation from audits done by QMII is that companies are good at closing non-conformities. Right? Non-conformity occurs, you're given 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever time frame you've set for yourself, you close it out in that time frame. But what happens is they're like that whack-a-mole, right? It goes into the hole from this side and suddenly pops open from another side, and then they pop open somewhere else. And they keep coming up. And the reason sometimes we wonder is why do they keep coming up, right? So we kind of through the webinar want to get you to look at system changes that you can make to prevent these from keeping popping up. Today they popped up in the purchasing department. Tomorrow something similar happened in the manufacturing one. Tomorrow something similar happened in another department. And what we've seen is that sometimes, there's never really a measure of, effectiveness of actions taken, right? Measure of effectiveness of actions taken, including consideration of things like residual risk, consequential risk, right? We made a change here. What's the impact on another part of our system? We updated our SOP here. We trained the people here, but is there an impact from this SOP on another part of the system? And it may make this area good, but it breaks it down somewhere else, right? So another reason for this webinar is this particular example here, right? Is, personally I hate to see user error, operator error, human error as a as a root cause, if you may, in corrective actions, right? And I'm sure there are many in the room here who would agree with me, so I might just be preaching to the choir over here. But the example that I bring up is we did an audit of an organization, and we were doing the audit. We said, okay, we see a non-conformity. What action has been taken to correct this? And they said, oh, we trained the operator. We've got records of their training conducted. We put them back out into the field. So, as an auditor, you'll end up pulling the thread a little more, and we started looking through their records, right? And as we looked at the records, we found in the past 9 months, right, there were 115 cases of operator error. 115 cases of operator error, and there was no investigation done by them on why do we have 115 cases of operator error. Is our corrective action of just training the person, right, and updating our SOP or keeping they didn't even update this, we just trained the person, kept a training record, and they kept going forward. So if you have 115 cases over 9 months, is that really effective corrective action, right? And what prevented them from looking beyond the human error? For those of you, because there's a huge percentage of people in the room who are internal auditors, you want to be very careful about how you word your non-conformity statements. I mean, we really go into in-depth in our auditor courses, teaching you how to write effective non-conformity statements, because nothing in your non-conformity statement should really point towards a human error. The way you write your non-conformities is the way the corrective actions are driven, especially as auditors. Those of you may be auditors, right? So you want to be very careful about the way you write your non-conformity statement, that it's not pointing anyone towards fixing the human. Your non-conformity statement must be written to identify the system error, and therefore it will point the organization to fix the system error rather than the human error. Now, keep in mind that humans learn through error, right? I mean, we have all these famous idioms, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs and all that good stuff. Right? So if you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right? You can't learn to walk or run without learning to walk. You can't learn to cycle without scraping your knees. And therefore, humans learn through error. I mean, that's just the beauty of it, right? We learn through error. That's the beauty of a process-based management system. It allows us to learn through error through the PDCA cycle. But only when the PDCA cycle is used is where we can learn through those errors, right? And therefore, when we build our systems, we don't want to build our systems for perfect individuals. We want to build our systems for individuals so they can make errors safely, right? Think of you error proofing or mistake proofing your house for your baby, right? You have a kid in the house, little toddler, put padding on the corners and everything, but again, based on your risk appreciation, right? But you child proof the house essentially to allow the kids to make errors without it being fatal. And therefore, there's a certain amount of risk assessment you have to do on the front end on where are those places that we absolutely cannot have the human make errors. There's a little part on the front end, and we'll talk more about that as we go through this here. But like I said, the system is meant to allow you to make errors so you can learn from errors. Where does the system fail is often in organizations, we bypass the plan and act stage of the PDCA cycle, where we make a plan, we implement the plan, but you're never really going back to do a good review of the plan, right? Of where can we improve the plan? How many of you in the room could say that you've actually reviewed your system in entirety? Different departments may have reviewed their own processes, procedures, and other things. But when was the last time your system was reviewed in entirety to look at the connections, right? To look at the connections between all the departments, Where can you see the connection between all the departments, right? And why do we bypass this plan and act stage? Because of conflicting priorities, because of time pressure, right? We have been pressurized to get the job done, and we are going to do what it takes to get the job. And what is pressurizing us to get the job done? Perhaps our, some sort of performance initiative, either tied into a bonus or operational priorities, like we got to get this out the door. What happens is every time things go wrong, you do a quick fix, right? You do a quick fix and you go right back to doing the work, and the cycle just runs right here between the D and C stage. you never really go up to the act stage. We just recently completed the webinar about 2 months ago on management reviews, right? Because this management reviews are so weak over here. They're just a documentation exercise. You really get no meaningful output to improve the plan and to improve your system as a overall. So conflicting priorities, time pressures, lack of training and others, like people are not trained, internal auditors trained how to do internal audits. People who are doing root cause analysis, no training on how to do root cause analysis. And yet you're given the responsibility to come up with effective corrective action. And sometimes non-conformities are seen as negative. So what do? Like a child, right? We spill a glass of milk and we immediately try and clean it up so mommy and daddy or whoever can't see it, right? We want to quickly clean it up. So non-conformities are seen as negative. We don't want people to know we made a mistake. We don't want, and that's why we'll talk about later about the culture being developed, etc. To, like I said, allow mistakes to be made safely. So people don't mind reporting mistakes when they occur. And when we teach here, sort of we use this analogy of an audit iceberg. For those of you who are internal auditors, I spoke about, writing your non-conformity, right? When we do audits, and it's not meant to be an auditing class, so permit me, please, right? And being respectful of all your experience, is when we audit, we look at a sample of the management system, and that sample is the tip of the iceberg above the water that you can see, right? But you don't know everything that's below the water. So when we write our non-conformity as an absolute, it appears like this is the only finding in the system. Some auditors say, no, Julius, I go down and I look a little deeper in the system. Sure. But can you guarantee to me that you can find every error in the system? You cannot. It's not your responsibility, even if you're the internal auditor. Your responsibility is to find one symptom of the problem. It is the organization's responsibility then, as the first step of corrective action, is to determine the extent of the non-conformity, which are these orange dots below the surface of the water. What is the extent of the non-conformity is what the organization has to determine, right? And therefore, your non-conformity must be written to allow them to search for these, and then you correct the entire issue through effective corrective action. Similarly, as internal auditor, especially, and I've been an internal auditor myself, so I know the struggle, right? I know the struggle. But what happens is because we have to do an internal audit and we are sometimes tasked with corrective action, we tend to do both at the same time. As we're doing the audit, we're asking questions, we identify the issue, and we start doing our like 5 whys immediately. Oh, but why did this occur? Why did this occur? Why did this occur? But in doing that, if I just use this example of like a fault tree analysis here, right? In doing so, when you start doing the root cause and questioning that during the audit itself, you will identify this bold circled area here as the non-conformity. But in those cases where you do that, I want you to walk away with this understanding that you prevent the organization from potentially considering all these other paths of root causes and non-conformities, right? All those other areas are never considered because your starting point for corrective action is going to be from this bold circle over here, from the bold circle over here. And all of these slides are just to set the framework for what comes next in sequence, right? Not all problems require corrective action. Again, people don't report non-conformities even because sometimes they're like, oh, we have to fill out this whole big paperwork, this form and everything. And then someone's going to be breathing down my neck to know what was the issue, why this and all that, right? I don't have time for all of that. So I'm just going to do the quick fix and move on. But as system leaders, we want people to tell us what was wrong. I'm yet to meet a leader in all the organizations I worked with who have said, Julius, I don't want to know what the risks are. I don't want to know what is going on wrong with my organization. Yes, is it a headache? Yeah, it's a headache, but I want to know that. I would rather know it because the only bad non-conformity is the one you do not know, right? I want to know what the problems are because then I can fix it. It's like you would rather know your kids are taking drugs than not know that they're taking drugs. The amount of corrective action you have to do, and I'm not going to go through this slide in detail because you'll get the slides later. It's just a reference point to start with, right? Is you ask yourself the question in making a determination, can we just do with the firefighting and put the fire out, which is the correction, right? Or do we actually need corrective action, which is how do we prevent the fire from occurring again? And what is the extent of the corrective action needed, right? Is it so big that we have to like redesign the system sometimes? And this is just a starting point. It's not all inclusive by any means, right? But as a note, not all non-conformities require corrective action. So don't do overkill. Sometimes correction is enough. You must go through the reasoning of, do we need corrective action or not? That due diligence must be exercised. And you may come away with saying no, but let's say, okay, you have a non-conformity, you took no corrective action, you just did the firefighting, you put the fire out. Very good. Monitor it, like almost like you're doing a fire watch, right? To see if the fire is going to restart again. And in that month, nothing happened. The next month, again, I had a similar non-conformity. The next month, again, I had a similar non-conformity. Now you need to do good corrective action. 3 months in a row, I've had the issue come up. Some of you maybe 2 months in a row. Sydney, I will address the system redesign as well, right? So keep in mind that you want people to report the issues. You take a call on, do I need correction? But like I said, maybe one person made an issue, it's one off, it was a memory lapse, whatever it is, I'm okay with it. But if I have 115 cases in 9 months, I definitely need more than just what I'm doing, right? I definitely need more than what I'm doing. So we start off with sort of some of those questions that you can ask. And perhaps the first step in problem solving, right, is you have identified it, but keep in mind, you have only identified that little circle in the tip of the iceberg. So you want to sort of probe a little more in being able to define the problem correctly. And so kind of just, we say plain English, but what actually happened, right? And if you proceed to fix your issue without clearly defining the system problem, that's when you find ineffective corrective action. And like I said, it happened in different departments, right? But when you write your non-conformities, if you're doing ISO audits, tie it back into a clause. Don't look at the local issue, but say how many times have we had non-conformities related to clause 8.1, 8.2, or 8.4 or 7.2, 7.3, whichever standard you may auditing to. And if we have 7.2 competence, right? If we have multiple non-conformities over 6 months, maybe in different departments, tied back into 7.2, then maybe we need to relook at our process by which we determine competence, assess competence, whatever it may be. But really, truly spending time to define the problem. I've seen people struggle document their procedures. And the reason they struggle with documenting the procedures is because they have not clearly defined what do we need this procedure that we're documenting to enable our team to achieve. And without asking and answering that question, you land up over documenting your procedure and it's overkill for your system, right? To what extent do we need to document this procedure? What do we need it to enable them to achieve? And the same for your problem solving. You have to carefully define the system problem. You have to determine the extent of the non-conformity. Without identifying if it can occur or recur elsewhere, you're not going to be able to do effective corrective action. So keep in mind the iceberg. Keep in mind the issues below the waterline that you don't see. And that's the first part of the investigation you do is what is the extent of the non-conformity? I've seen many times when this is bypassed. It's just, let's fix this issue and why did this issue occur? And it's all about this issue, right? It's not, first step is not how big is the issue? Did the auditor identify everything or is there something else below the surface? And for that, we'll have an example right at the end of this, but you have to get other people involved who are closer to the problem sometimes. Where was it supposed to be caught? Because remember, non-conformities occur in a change. When those major explosions occur, right? And I'm using explosion as a term, not in a real explosion, but the major big kaboom non-conformities, right? Really bad upset customers, cancel contracts, whatever. You'll find that there was always like a breadcrumb of, breadcrumb trail all along the way, right? Because non-conformities occur in a chain, but they're small non-conformities first. They go unnoticed or something occurred, someone didn't report it, they made small fixes to it. I mean, look at Chernobyl. And if you read the whole history of Chernobyl, you'll see the breadcrumbs along the way. It's clear as light that something bad is going to happen. And then it's not a question of if something bad is going to happen. The question is, when is it going to happen? We just don't know when. There's a surety that it's going to happen. We just don't know when it's going to happen. Think of every major disaster that has happened. When you look at the breadcrumbs, you'll see this question come up. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it was going to happen. So consider your failed preventive controls. What failed? Did something change in the system that our existing controls did not capture it? Maybe you had a really competent team. The team changed out, you got a new team in, but you never reassessed your controls to see are these controls effective with our new team, even though they're not as competent as the last team, right? So consider your failed preventive controls because you have preventive controls in place. You may have those detection controls to help you identify just either as something fails, right? So as soon as something fails, if you're able to catch it, you in a manufacturing chain, it may look like some kind of laser assessment kind of thing that's scanning the product as it goes out. You may have people doing like, inspections and quality controls, but did your detection controls fail? Look at it a little more in depth. Examine decisions made in the moment and the context that made them appear reasonable. So even if the human made the error, what caused them to make the error? What was the reasoning that allowed them to make the error? And really the question then you're asking is, how do we stop the failure traveling down the line? And that means, how can I catch this? Even if this failure occurred the next time, maybe in a different department, how can I catch it earlier? The earlier you catch it, the lesser the consequence of it that you have to face. Another great question, again, human error, I accept. It's not that people don't make mistakes, right? I said we learn from mistakes. But sometimes the question is not why the person made the mistake, but why did a good person? And when I say good person, it's someone you have found to be competent. You trained them, right? They went through your assessment process, your interview process. You hired them as a competent person. So what caused this good person to do a bad thing? And by that is the last bullet on this slide is the question we're asking is, how did the system fail the individual? How did the system fail the individual? Because your system found them competent at the start, right? And we say no system survives contact with human behavior unchanged. So what changed? And you want to look into what caused the like I said, what caused this person to a bad thing? Was the work rushed? Were directions unclear? Was it harder to do it right than wrong? Right? And as the image shows, unclear expectations sometimes. It's like poor communication. It wasn't communicated to the person what was expected of them. The process is flawed because the controls are not effective, the resources are not effective sometimes, time pressures, right? Because you're pressurizing them to do something within a certain time frame. And sometimes it may be inconsistent support from the leadership. And when I say leadership, I don't mean you're like top management, but leaders at that level, right? But always sort of ask this question, how did the system fail the individual? That means, why did a good person do a bad thing? And then the other question to consider is, what did the system reward? So I have this image of a fire door, right? That's not supposed to be kept open with any kind of hooks being tied open. I'm sure some of you in your organizations have seen similar issues where controls, in a sense, right? The fire door is like a control. The control has been bypassed. The control, and the question to ask is either what's causing people to bypass the control? How can we make it easier for them not to bypass the control, right? What is not working in our system that's causing them to bypass these controls? And keep in mind that behavior follows the incentives and the objectives of your system. If you want to reward speed, if you want to reward speed, then sometimes accuracy becomes optional. It becomes optional. Again, when I say behavior, it's the culture of your organization. What does leadership push down the line? Is leadership willing to put the whole assembly line on halt and stop the assembly line? I'm sure a lot of you have read that famous story of the Toyota production system and their plant in California and how the leader encouraged the employee to stop the production line. But it's a big deal, right? Do leadership exhibit what they are expecting of others, right? Does the leadership exhibit what they're expecting to others? If caution is penalized, where people like, do a stop work and then you penalize them for stopping work, right? If output is rewarded, and think about it, right? When we look at it, the people who prevent the fires may not be celebrated or glorified as much as the people who fight the fires. And so every kid growing up never wants to be the person preventing the fire. They always want to be the firefighter, right? The kids want to be firefighters. So what is your system rewarding? Do you ever reward someone because they did something great? They helped prevent the fire from occurring. And like I said, relook at your process objectives, relook at your system objectives. relook at the performance evaluation objectives and see if there's, so when you're doing your root cause analysis, you want to consider these things as well. Is what is our system rewarding? Is there something in the objective set that caused people to go down and sort of work towards this or bypass a control or whatever else it may be? And a well-designed system then will deliver on the planned results. It's the objectives that drive everything in the system. Just as the objectives drive your audits, it determines what sample size you pick, who you speak to, what questions you ask them. The objectives of the system determine what the system delivers, right? So when you do a RCA, please always look at what is our system asking of people, because people are going to deliver on those expectations then. What step in the process is relying on memory or experience? So if the outcome depends on someone just knowing what to do, then performance will vary. And in these cases, again, based on risk, someone asked earlier a question about system redesign, right? When we look at system redesign, we want to look at how our process works today and determine in system redesign is there changes we can make to the system. For that, the first step is to identify what are all the potential risks, what are all the potential things that can go wrong in our system. So you may look at doing like a process FMEA and consider what are all the things that can go wrong in our system. Once you have done that, determine, score those risks, score those risks essentially, even roughly if you do it. You don't have to have some fancy criteria. Roughly measure what is high one, who are people are doing it. Is the process owner who's determined, because they are the ones who are answerable for the effectiveness of that process. The process owner has to answer the level of risk, whether high, medium, low. Whatever is high risk, you want to definitely have controls in place to mitigate and bring it down to a lower level of risk, right? The best type of controls are where you can either eliminate the risk completely, right, or substitute the risk, or you can put administrative controls, like not administrative, my apologies, engineering controls in place, right? So if I have a fire alarm, for example, someone can't just lean on a wall and press the fire alarm. They have to physically, intentionally break the glass, and the glass is not easy to break either, right? You break the glass and then you can press the fire alarm. So it has to be like a very well thought out thing. But if it's an emergency stop, do I want it to be under a glass? No. But even then, it's intentionally, right? It's twist and push down. It's not like just push down. You can't just push it down. You have to twist and push it down to activate the emergency stop. Just because someone leans on a panel, they're not going to stop the emergency stop. So keep in mind that those controls are put in place where the risk is high. And administrative controls like posters, PPE, training, SOPs, these are very weak level controls. They're at the bottom of the pyramid of effectiveness, right? They're very weak controls because these are easy to get bypassed. Now, if someone is highly competent, excellent, like doctors in an operating theater, airline pilots, but even they have interlocks built into the cockpit. They have a co-pilot who's overseeing everything they do and could question them. Why did you do this? Or why aren't you doing that? But their decisions are questioned. In those cases where they're highly competent, yes, let them rely on memory. Julius is not saying you have to document everything and don't rely on anyone's memory, right? However, in cases where you don't want the performance to vary at all, then consider engineering the controls into the software, into the system, into the machine as it may be, right? So it's repeatable. And then as you get, again, are you getting part-time labor that's rotating in and out, or they're permanent, they've been there a long time? But wherever you don't want the performance to vary, please make sure that you document it. So again, as part of your root cause analysis, that's your question to ask yourself, right? Is this process reliant on people's memory? Is that okay? Is that good enough? Because keep in mind that that memory varies with fatigue, workload, distractions, etc. That's why airline pilots, they have work rest hours they have to meet. They can't fly because their ability to exercise that competence reduces as they get more fatigued, right? As they get more fatigued. And sometimes it's very difficult for us to know when we are just, tired, like I'm tired versus when you're dangerously fatigued. That line is so fine. It's like a blurred line. It's hard to know when you're on this side of the line and when you've crossed over to the next side. It's like when people say, oh, I had a drink. I'm not, I'm okay. I can still drive. But your judgment has reduced. Even if it be like a small percentage, it is definitely reduced compared to when you don't have a drink, right? It's like that. So competent personnel compensate for unclear instructions, missing details, inconsistent methods, where they're sometimes afraid to ask or they don't have the time to ask, right? Again, the example we have right at the end of the webinar, we'll talk about this. But sometimes you have to walk across. Uh, 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 Mary will answer some of these questions towards the end. If not, like I said, I'll get back to you, right? Thank you for all of you for putting your questions in there. Sometimes you have to walk across the shop floor to get to a computer, to get your instructions. That's why what does the standard say? The ISO standards make the information available and suitable for use where and when needed. Make the information available and suitable for use where and when needed, right? And it must be suitable for use for that level of competence of that person. If the person can't read well, if there's a language barrier, use graphic images, right? Use like images, screenshots, whatever to make it known to them. Now the question is, what did we assume? Even during audits as well, right? During audits, but also during the root cause analysis. Sometimes we assume that certain controls are in place and are effective. We assume that resources are in place and people have access to these resources. Oh yeah, they have access to the SOPs. Sure they do, but is it convenient to them? Is it suitable for them, right? And problems happen when we thought replaced with we looked. We thought the SOP said this. We thought someone said that, right? And you'll see like in certain high stress environments, like even in a maritime world, when orders are given or the military, right? Highly stressful environment, you're like bombs are flying, bullets are flying, you're like someone gives an order, you have to repeat the order out and it has to be acknowledged, right? Because someone needs to know, did you hear the order correctly? And there's very little scope for error, if any, of in those scenarios. And then what happens when we assume, right? When we assume that everything else is okay, that's why your non-conformity statements writing is so important. We fix what went wrong, but we often miss those things that we assume because we never went out to validate it or check it, right? As part of the root cause, you're like, yeah, we have the SOP, but you never went to validate or check whether the SOP is actually written, it's a correct version, do people have access to it, what's the problem with them accessing it, is there any problem at all? All those steps get bypassed. And strong systems don't rely on assumptions, right? You must, like I said, make the information available to people. And risk, we say, as a takeaway, is not a one-time exercise. Like I said, you can't just do that process FMEA once and then never look at it again. You must go back to look at it again. You must go back to look at it, review it at some periodic interval and do a good holistic review. Don't just do a paperwork exercise. Even your own process, do it. Every day we leave the house and go to work. I'm telling you, you do this all the time. But when it comes to your system, we don't do it. Every day we leave work and go to the office. It's almost those of us who've been working in the same place for at least a year or more, we are on autopilot. We walk out the door, get in our car. Next thing you know, you're at your destination. You don't even know how you got there. But in doing that, you've already done a risk assessment, including on which day of the week, which route are you going to take? On which day of the week do I have to leave a little earlier or a little later or whatever else it may be? And we are constantly doing risk assessments day in, day out and reviewing our risk assessments as we go on. And it's the same you want to do of your system. If nothing else, if you're not in charge of your whole system, at least for your own process, you can do it, right? So another question, of course, like I said, is it one-off or is it a pattern? And sometimes it's hard to capture these patterns. The easy way to do it is to always tie your non-conformities back into a clause of the standard that you're conforming to, or a clause of a requirement that you're conforming, like a citation from a requirement. Then you don't really look at the individual issues that occur, but you say, how many times did we have a non-conformity related to clause XYZ? Sometimes you may identify the root cause, but the leadership doesn't want to put the resources or budget to that root cause, right? And remember, root cause analysis, really what it's about is sort of accepting vulnerability, right? I say, Julius has a fight with his wife and he goes and he's like, I'm sorry, darling, and she'll accept my sorry only so much before, I have to take greater action and show some positive corrective action, if you may, right? Because if I don't show that positive corrective action, we're probably going to be in the front of a divorce lawyer at some point, right? And therefore we need, and sometimes you can do the corrective action on your own. Sometimes you need a therapist to step in, right? So QMI could be the therapist sometimes stepping in, but sometimes you need that external consultant stepping in and being able to look at it from a lens that is really truly impartial and objective, right? That's impartial and objective. But consider the one-off patterns. Like I said, if you connect it back to clauses, including your root causes, when you come down to your root causes, actually sort of categorize your root cause. How many times have we had this root cause contribute to an issue, right? How many times have we had this root cause contribute to an issue is what you want to ask sometimes. And having more inside root cause may give you the leverage you need to tell leadership we really need to address it because we constantly see the same root cause coming up. They may not act on it sometimes, but in doing so, you have told them the risk, they have accepted the risk, right? And as leadership, we have to accept that leadership may accept some risk. So small issues often mask larger recurring patterns. That's why when you write nonconformity, it's easy to go to the low-hanging fruit of, user error, awareness, competence, documentation control. But those are sometimes, not always, but sometimes they're symptomatic of bigger issues somewhere else, right? And they're masking those larger recurring patterns. Similar failures get separated, like I said, by wording, owner, departments, and we may not see them as one because they're like one occurred in one department, another occurred in another department. So finding that commonality in the clauses helps you to then say, okay, this is a similar issue. Maybe the symptomatic of it was different departments, but it's really about the same clause that we're trying to fix, right? And without trending, you have that whack-a-mole as well, right? The same weakness is fixed repeatedly, and you don't realize sometimes you're fixing the same issue. So question again is, could this happen again tomorrow, right? So in those cases where you're not doing corrective action, firstly, the key question is, could this occur again tomorrow is a question you want to ask yourself, right? And sometimes language creates the illusion of control, especially when we put that SOP together. If you update your SOP on paper, we've updated the SOP, it looks great, the controls look great. But you must always assess the feasibility of that new SOP you put in place. How feasible is it for this SOP to be effective? That means for us to actually implement these controls and ensure they're being done, to provide these resources that we say we're going to provide, etc. Right? Because we may write a non-conform corrective action and it gives us a sense of comfort. Oh, we've closed this corrective action out. We have an SOP. But if the failure was the failure of people to follow the SOP, will adding an SOP in fix your system? Probably not. And as a reminder, right, we say training is the most easily reversible corrective action because you train someone today. I mean, that's how our memories is. We are not great at remembering stuff, right? But we forget it. 1 month hence, 2 months hence, 3 months, we've forgotten it. If training is going to be one of the corrective action, that's your kind of key corrective action that you're going to take, then make sure you have some sort of a recurring training to cement it in people's mind, right? Cement it in people's mind. And like I said, I have that diagram of Sisyphus, right? So are we fixing the problem sometimes or are we just hiding it? And therefore, when your corrective action is not effective, you want to look at, are we rewarding closure where we just want to close the non-conformity because we don't want to see it on the dashboard, right? We don't want to see the red light on the dashboard. We want all green lights. Right? Quick fixes are also often highly visible. So people like, oh, we did this, we made this change, a quick fix is highly visible, but sometimes, and we say largely, but sometimes it's not effective, right? Most actions will increase awareness, but leave the system unchanged. That means you made someone aware of what they should be doing. But has the system ensured that if they forgot the next time around, there'll be something to catch it? Is there a risk to them forgetting again? If there's no risk to them forgetting again, it's okay. But if there is a risk, can we put another layer in place, right? Another layer in place. All these controls are, of course, based on your risk appetite as an organization. And if nothing in the process changed, essentially we say the risk still exists, right? So sometimes you may reduce the likelihood of something occurring, but it can still occur, right? The only way to really get rid of or to reduce the severity part of the consequence of the risk, or the severity of the risk, is by a sort of process redesign, right? Any of these other smaller things, update SOPs, everything, it may reduce the likelihood of occurring, but if it did occur, the consequence will still be the same, right? The consequence will still be the same. So, quick third poll here. I know we are coming up on the top of the hour. I hope the presentation is useful to you as we're going through it. and that, I know there are a lot of questions coming in, and I promise you I will take the time to reach out to each of you and answer your questions as well, right? Let me just launch this poll again, 45 seconds, and I will close it out, right? But if you could improve one area immediately based on what we have spoken about, right? If you, in your thinking, if you could improve one area immediately, which would it be? Is the question, right? Which would it be? I also strategically put this poll in here because it gives me a chance to just stop speaking for 30 seconds. Thank you to all who are answering in here as well as, and I see some chat messages coming in as well. Yes, I think Denise, someone else answered some similar questions, similar comments. All right, so just another 15 seconds. I'll close it out. I'll close it out. Another 15 seconds. I'll close it out here. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. And at the end of it, once we have implemented all our corrective actions, right, as a closeout of that PDCA and the corrective action piece, right? So there's a planning piece to the corrective action. There's a do for the corrective action. There's a check, and you're kind of at the check and act stage, if you may, on uh, you know uh, what changed in our system. Has anything changed? And so we asked the question to you to consider, right? Is if you reviewed your last 10 corrective actions, right? If you reviewed your last 10 corrective actions, how many changed the system? If you reviewed your last 10 corrective actions in your management system, how many actually change the system and not just the user, right? And not just the user. So one way to know if your corrective action is measurable is what changed. So often as an auditor, when the auditees or when the clients will send me non-conformity that they should to close out, and they'll be like, we train these people. I'm like, great, right? How do you ensure that this doesn't occur again? How do you ensure that the training gets passed on to the next set of people who come in, right? Because they're not going to be with you forever. And how do you ensure that consistently gets done down, including not just this department, but if other departments need to know, have you considered whether other department personnel need to be trained in similar awareness as well? So what changes system, how do you measure success? Like oftentimes they're so quick to close out non-conformities, but good companies don't mind leaving the non-conformities open for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, because they know, right? They know that it's going to take that long. It's going to take that long to verify that the corrective action is actually effective, right? So you want to always make sure that your corrective action is not easily reversible. You're doing the test to make sure, is it really? And one way to do that is that. So here we have an industry example of, a client we worked with as QMI, which was like a aircraft maintenance client. They did maintenance of these big planes, and they constantly had issues with people completing these non-conformity tags, right? Now, this is just an example of non-conformity tags, all these different colors. There are about 8 or 10 different colors. I forget now exactly, but constantly issues with the operators, mechanics, basically finding the technicians, whoever, they're filling out either the wrong color tag or they're filling it incorrectly. And so, we were working with them in consulting, and we went and we asked the operators, what can you walk us through your process, how you do the tags? So they said, yeah, we get the tags right here at this box close to their station where they're working. Great, it's made available, suitable for their use. I said, how do you fill it up? They're like, oh, we know. I said, how do you know? How would you check it if you know you're filling it correct? Oh, they're like, we have an SOP, we can look at it. Where's the SOP? They had to literally walk away to the opposite corner of the hangar in the office shed over there, get on the computer, go to SharePoint, log in, go to the one folder down, two folder down, three folder down, open the SOP, look at it. How many people do you think were actually going and looking at this SOP? None. So we asked the people, what do you think would make it easier for you to do it correctly? They said, oh, we had some form of summary of the SOP posted right here where the non-conformity tags are, right? And if we had examples of how to fill out each tag correctly, that would be super helpful. So we worked with a client to develop some kind of a poster chart that was posted right at the station where they pulled out the non-conformity tags. And in the subsequent year, they had almost zero non-conformities related to non-conforming tags. Zero non-conformities. But you have to be able to define the problem. You have to get inputs from the users on what in the system is failing them, right? What would make it easier for them to conform? And we mapped the failure pathway. We identified where the controls were breaking down. We redesigned the controls to make it easier so the system supports the individual. And then, of course, the measure of effectiveness was verifying over time that they were not getting the same issue again and again and again. And therefore, in conclusion, your system is a proactive and preventive tool. If it's a reactive tool, it's not working well. If it's a reactive tool, it's not working well. The intent is for it to be a risk assessment. It's like, when you're driving your car and you're coming up too fast on the car ahead and the car gives you alarm, they go like beep, 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 beep. It's kind of like that. That's what it should do before you rear end the car ahead of you. So the system, of course, reflects priorities. And if your priorities are not set correctly, your system is going to reward those priorities that have been set. Corrective action is really about re-looking at your system, redesigning it where needed. I gave you the chart, you can read it later, right? So failure is less likely. It's never going to guarantee that nothing is ever going to happen, but failure is less likely. And if you're failing safe, right? And always consider the reversibility of your corrective action. So we are almost at the top of the hour. I have my last poll, but while that's running, I'm going to look through some of the comments in the chat here and try and get back to some of you on it. Okay. Look through the chat. I really thank each of you for attending and staying on for the whole duration. I've noticed that not many, a few people had to leave early, I understand, but for the most part, you'll all hung in there, as they say, right? Wow, New Zealand. Okay, excellent. That's like really late, but thank you, Delvin. Uh, excellent, excellent. Let me see here. George, thank you for being here for your comments. Sydney, I hope briefly in the time we were able to speak about system redesign. However, we can always take the conversation offline and talk about it further as well, right? Let me close out the poll here. It's been open for a while. Uh, we can definitely take it offline. So, for government agencies, few procurement options, but my email and the office phone numbers there. Uh, yeah, yeah. So, when speed and accuracy are necessary, Mary, it's not that it's not achievable, right? You can achieve it, but then you have to put more resources to it, right? So if speed and accuracy are both necessary, that's great, right? But if you want accuracy and you want speed, then you have to throw more money at the problem, as they say, right? So you have maybe more inspections or more whatever it is. And it's not that you can't get speed and accuracy. I mean, I've been to a plant that manufactures basically, all caliber bullets for the entire United States, and they're going like 300,000 rounds like in a minute are being manufactured at this place. So, speed and accuracy are possible. You just have to throw the right amount of resources at it then. Sydney says since are available and capable and capacity is properly in place, speed out act always jointly and the process excellent. Sydney, I agree with that. What happens, speed or accuracy are both expected? So Denise, I think that was a similar question asked earlier. And like I said, if they're both expected, then otherwise you have to have the conversation with leadership saying, we can't get both of these because we don't have enough resources, right? And the system is stressed. For a certain period of time, you'll be able to push through and achieve, but you're not going to be able to sustain it over a larger period of time. Eduardo, thank you for your contribution there, saying using matrix to streamline and determine if corrective, better control or no control level is required. Excellent. Uh, Beth has left, I believe, but thank you. Wonderful. So that is the end. I think someone sent me a private chat on if we do problem-solving trainings, and yes, we do a problem-solving training. If you want information on that, Lisa is the person to reach out to and ask her about. But thank you all very much for attending. And like I said, if there's Lisa's put our next topic that we are looking at in our next webinar. It's data, metrics, and meaning. Are we measuring what matters? Are we measuring what matters? So thank you, Barbara. Appreciate you being here. Yeah. Uh, thank you, Mindy. And Dhiren, as always, thank you, sir. We look forward to interacting with you further and at least having you in a next webinar where possible. Okay. Laura, thank you very much, ma'am. Delvin, thank you. Yeah, from New Zealand. Thank you very much. Mary, thank you. And anyone has any questions, I said, please email. It's going to be in June. The date will go out for the next webinar. I'm still deciding. I think it's like first or third week June. We were just talking about it this morning. Mohammed from Pakistan, thank you very much. Lisa will send a email broadcast out here shortly as well, I guess, by next week sometime. Sure. Thank you very much, Leah. All of you, thank you very much. Antonio. Captain Getnet, thank you very much for attending. Jennifer, thank you. All right, I'm going to stop the recording here. Eduardo, we look forward to you having there. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mohammed, I think Lisa responded to that. Currently the way the system is set up, it doesn't allow us to send out a certificate automatically. But we are working on that for future, sir. So, like I said, I'll be ending the event, but all this information about the recording, everything will go back out to you folks. If you don't receive anything from us, which would be strange, reach out to Lisa, please, or myself, right? Please reach out to Lisa or myself, or anyone in the QMI team. Just go on our website, info@QMI, and reach out to us. We'll be happy to help.